Morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Suzanne Walker. I'm the supervisor from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar. I'm really excited to have Christy Franzman with us today to talk about the Early Literacy Award, the Firefly Award. I do want to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is provided as part of our Indiana State Library Services series of webinars. And to register for other webinars available for this series or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at library.in.gov under Services for Libraries. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, you can also see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways that we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, I hope you are subscribed to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about Indiana State Library's collections, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. As you can see, if you are having sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box. That's over here. If you are having sound issues during the webinar, if there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve any sound issues that you might be experiencing, don't worry, because we are recording this webinar and you can watch it offline after the meeting has after it has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. At this time, we are not experiencing any global sound issues. So again, today's webinar will be archived and available to access and share on the Indiana State Library's archive trainings page. We usually get those transcribed and up on YouTube after a couple of weeks after the webinar. And also, I want to let you guys know we're trying something new with our LEUs for webinars. I'm going to have an LEU document that you're going to be able to download at the end of the webinar. So I'll walk you through that when we get to that time. Without further ado, I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Christy Franzman. I'm really excited that she's here with us today to talk about the Firefly. The Firefly Award is one of my favorite things that we do at Center for the Book, and Christy and I are now the co-directors for Center for the Book, so I'm going to go ahead and let Christy take it away.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. Like I said, we're going to talk about how to light up your early literacy programs with the Firefly Award. And again, I'm Christy Franzman, the Indiana Young Readers Center librarian at the Indiana State Library, and as Suzanne said, also the co-director for Indiana Center for the Book. So first off, I thought we'd start with explaining what is Indiana Center for the Book. It's actually a program of the Indiana State Library and an affiliate of the Center for the Book in the Library of Congress.
That Library of Congress.
That Library of Congress.
The big one.
So it's not a physical center, but a program that promotes all the things that we love as librarians, interest in reading, writing, literacy, libraries, and Indiana's literary heritage. And we do this by sponsoring events and serving as an information resource at the state and local level. So some of the initiatives of the Indiana Center for the Book include the 1816 to 2016 Literary Map of Indiana, which maybe you all received. I know Suzanne worked hard on that one.
Yes, and I did want to mention, since we're talking about the map quickly, there are still maps available, so if any of you need literary maps, you can just shoot me an email. I will put my email address on the screen. There's also a form that you can fill out on the website.
Awesome, great. The Center for the Book was also responsible for the Indiana Bicentennial Toolkit for libraries that you might have taken advantage of last year during the Indiana Bicentennial. Also the Letters About Literature, the annual essay contest and program that we hold here at the State Library. The Great Lakes Reads program, the Next Indiana Bookshelf, maybe some libraries out there received those books. The Statehood Day essay contest, even the Indiana Chant by April Pulley Sayre that we had for the Bicentennial. And of course, the Indiana Early Literacy Firefly Award, which we're going to talk about today. So I do want to skip out. From time to time, I'm going to pop out of the presentation here and show you some of the pages I'm going to talk about. So if you go from the Indiana State Library homepage, www.in.gov/library, right here is Indiana Center for the Book. So we're going to pop over to the Indiana Center for the Book. It tells you about the center, the current programs that I just went over, and also some more resources, how you can donate, and even a contact. So if you ever need that information, remember that you can go to that page. Okay. Good?
Yep.
Alrighty. So I just wanted to show you where that is. So the Early Literacy Firefly Award, well, as you all, I'm sure already are aware, we have state awards that are honoring books for other age groups. We have the Young Hoosier Book Award for grades K through 3, 4 through 6, and 6 through 8. It's kind of split out among the different age groups. And then the Elliott Rosewater Indiana High School Book Award for grades 9 through 12. So the Indiana Early Literacy Firefly Award is for outstanding picture books for children under the age of 6. Because as we all know, reading to kids at an early age is important for the development of their literacy skills. So the purpose of this award is to encourage parents, caregivers, and young children to interact together with exceptional picture books.
Christy, I just want to say I love the fact that you said interact together with picture books, because clearly most of these children can't read.
Exactly.
So I love that.
Exactly. And we're going to explain a little bit about that. Like I said, we're building those early literacy skills among kids. Yeah, they're pre-readers, we can call them. And as you can see from the logo, the Firefly logo, it's all about using the 5 practices of every child ready to read: talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing. So information about the Firefly Award is linked from the Indiana Center for the Book page. So again, I'm going to pop out here. And down here under our programs, you'll see right here is Indiana Literacy Firefly Award. So a lot of this information I'm going to go over today, but once in a while I'm going to pop back here and show you some of the resources I'm talking about. So how are the books nominated? How do books get nominated for this award? Well, actually, they're nominated by you.
Yay!
Yeah. Youth librarians in schools and libraries in Indiana can nominate books between June and October 1st each year. I mean, who better to nominate outstanding new picture books for kids than those who work with them every day? Mm-hmm. So nominating books is really easy too. All you have to do is send an email to the Indiana Center for the Book, which is at icb@library.in.gov. So the address is right up there. And we just need a little bit of information, some standard information about each nomination. We would need the title, of course, and the author, the illustrator, since these are picture books, they're all going to have illustrators, the publication date, and 100 words or less. I mean, we're talking brief here.
Yeah, doesn't have to be long.
No, and it does not need to be a book report or essay, but a justification of just why is this book special and how does it support at least 3 of those ECRR practices. That's what we're really aiming for, is we want to hit at least 3 of the 5 practices. And again, those are talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing. So what's the criteria for your nominations? Well, first of all, it needs to be in print. Kind of an obvious one, but we want to make sure libraries and families and others will be able to obtain the book, make it easy for them to get it. So it definitely needs to be in print. And it also needs to be published in its current edition within the current award cycle year. So what that means, I'll give you an example. So let's say when sending in your nominations for the next award, you'd be sending in your nominations between June and October of this year. So the nominations must have been published in 2016 or 2017.
Right.
So far in 2017, correct?
Right, that's right. And when I think about this criteria, I think that it's slightly confusing the way that we have it written there. But I always think of it as the year before and the year that you're in.
Yes.
So, like Christy said, our next nomination cycle is coming up in June. And so you would be able to nominate any books that were published in all of 2016 and 2017 up to where we are at that point.
Exactly.
So if you know of a great picture book that's coming out in like September of 2017, you could totally nominate that book. Or you can hold on to it and nominate it the following year.
True,
So,
exactly. So especially if we miss them there at the end of 2017,
Right.
hang on to them for nominations for the 2018 cycle.
Right. But I think the main reason that we have this criteria is that we're really interested in highlighting new books for families. So often we get in these cycles where our favorite picture book is Go Dog Go or Hop on Pop, and those are great. Those are great books
Sure.
to share. However, there's so many great new books coming out too, and that's really part of the focus of this award as well.
Exactly. Great. Well said.
Thanks.
The next one seems really obvious, maybe possess strong child appeal. But think about, there are some books out there that maybe we love as adults and we just fall in love with when we read it, but maybe it just doesn't, come off as strong to children. So we want to make sure that they're not just books that we enjoy, but books that the kids under the age of 6 are enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
That also means that maybe it's not over their heads and more of an elementary age content as well. Next one, of course, I mentioned before, support at least 3 of those ECRR practices. And the bottom one, have artistic quality with text that supports the illustrations or a compelling narrative provided by illustrations. So in other words, a high quality book all around. Text, illustrations, narrative should all be award worthy. This guideline is great because it also makes sure not to eliminate quality wordless books
Right.
from being nominated, because as we know, there are some really great wordless books out there.
Absolutely, but the really funny thing is that we had to eliminate a book last year, I think it was, because it had no pictures.
No pictures.
And
No
it was-
illustrations.
And it was the book with no pictures. And
That's right.
we looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And we knew it was a great, wonderful book, and we knew kids loved it, but it didn't have any pictures.
It
so
didn't quite fit
It didn't
in.
quite fit in.
Yeah. But also a great book.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So once these nominations are received by Indiana's Center for the Book, from you, they're passed on to the Firefly Committee to review. So the Firefly Committee is made up of professionals in Indiana, including teachers, librarians, caregivers, and project coordinators who are involved with early childhood development. So you notice there's a little bit different of a makeup of the committee than the nominations all come from Indiana librarians, whether you're in a school or public library.
And I just want to mention that if you work in a library, we count you. So
Yes.
it doesn't mean you have to have an MLS.
Oh, good point.
Right.
Thank you.
It just means that you're working in a library with children. If you work in a library with children, we really encourage you to nominate books for this award.
Wonderful. The committee, we like to have a different kind of makeup. It would be ideal, so we have some teachers, still we have librarians, but also caregivers, maybe in daycares or preschools, project coordinators. For an example,
We have a partnership with Early Learning Indiana, and they are on our committee. They work a lot with daycare centers, so it's great to have their feedback as well, because they know, librarians might say this is a quality book and it's wonderful, but maybe the kids don't like it as much. So they really have a lot of connection to that child appeal part.
great. So we're getting kind of a variety of professionals out there in the field who work with young kids and early literacy. The path to choosing the final 5 nominees is pretty similar to some of the other state award committees. If you've ever served on the Young Hoosier or the Rosie, the committee reads all the books nominated by Indiana youth librarians. We've had around 30.
Yeah, it's usually about 30, and that might seem low, but remember, we're just in our 3rd year.
Exactly.
And we do have a pretty narrow scope of books that would even match our criteria. So we normally end up with 30 to 35 books that we're reading.
We then discuss each book as a committee, which can help. It can really help. This discussion is always a lot of fun. We talk about each book, and it kind of can shed some new light on a title, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
Right?
We're pretty honest. But the great thing about it is we do kind of an online phone meeting, so it doesn't involve getting together on a Saturday to meet up. So that kind of makes it a little easier to do. Each committee member then goes back and assigns number rankings to each of the titles. And the rankings are averaged, and the top 5 ranking books become our final nominees for the Firefly Award. Just a little bit of a side note on the history, was that the first year there used to be 8 final nominees, but professionals in the field determined that that was a lot of books for this age group.
Absolutely.
To read, remember, and then vote on. So 5 books seems to be the magic number for kids this age, and you can even do it in one story time, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So 5 books. And here, once we have our final 5 nominees, we work with teachingbooks.net to create and print the ballots. So just in case you haven't seen them, which you should, but we'll go ahead and take it out. So right on here, one of the resources we have, here is the Indiana Early Literacy Firefly Award ballot for 2016-2017. So again, it goes over who can vote, when the deadline is, and then what the nominees are. And teachingbooks.net, like I said, prints these out for us, and so there's a direct link for them.
And that link takes you directly to their resources that are tied to these particular 5 books, which is great.
And we're going to look at those too.
Yay!
Yeah. So this year we were able to send 15 copies of the ballot to each public library system in Indiana. So that's why I said you might have seen them since we sent those out. But this is just to get you started. The ballot's also online, like I showed you, and you can print as many as you need from there. So those 15 that we sent out, like I said, were just to get you going. So this year's nominees are Best in Snow by April Pulley-Sayre, who happens to be an Indiana author. Music Class Today by David Weinstone. Race Car Count by Rebecca K. Dotlich. Again, happens to be another Indiana author. We had 2 show up in our final nominees this year. Grumpy Pants by Claire Messer, and Don't Wake Up the Tiger by Britta Teckentrup. So now we're all set for kids under the age of 6 to read and vote for their favorite book. So you might be wondering exactly how that works with kids this age.
And I just want to interject and say that I tried very hard to keep my mouth shut while you were reading those titles. Because it's, you want to be like, oh, that one's my favorite. But I don't want to influence any 5-year-olds that might be on the webinar today.
That's right. During the story time, we try not to influence, too. It was hard. So children under the age of 6 vote by circling their favorite Firefly nominee on the ballot. It is expected and known that most children at this age will need help from a parent or adult. There is even, on our resources on the Firefly Award page, information on how to vote. So this is a great resource to help you. It tells you like how to vote, who can vote, where to turn those votes in. Again, it gives you the nominees. So this is a great informational page. I'm going to go over some of that information, but just so you know, it's online as well. So ballots are turned into voting locations, usually public libraries, but also schools, daycares, bookstores, and others can be voting stations. So every effort should be made to make sure that each child only votes once. I know this can be hard if they're going to different places, but usually if you just ask them if they voted before, hopefully we can kind of
control for that
a little bit, as much as possible. So voting locations then tally the votes for each book and just email them to Indiana Center for the Book. Again, it's icb@library.in.gov by May 19th. So that's this year's deadline, is by May 19th. We need those tallies for the books because it's a pretty quick turnaround. Once we get our votes and our tallies in, the winner will be announced May 22nd. So it's just a few days after. So that's why we do have that deadline. So on May 22nd, we will find out our new 2017 winner. So just to kind of flash back the previous years, the first winner of the Firefly Award was Bill Cotter in 2015 for his interactive book, Don't Push the Button.
My stepkids loved that book.
How many of you could just put it in the chat, but how many of you read this in story time or to your kids and they loved it? It's a fun one. It's a lot of fun.
My stepkids just loved it.
Yeah. The 2016 winner of the Firefly Award was Brian Wan for his fun book, Hooray for Hat. And that was also a fun one, especially in story time for the kids to kind of play along with that. So the winners receive a unique handmade glass. This is from the last year's award. It's a handmade glass award created by a local Indiana artist, Lisa F. Pello at Hot Blown Glass. So we like to, use local artists and things like that. We think it's a pretty unique award. So it's got the Firefly on there as well as the Every Child Ready to Read practices.
And every year she makes it better, actually, which is really fun.
So we've had 2 awards in 2 years. This is our 3rd. So like I said, like with everything, you kind of get better with practice, and each time we learn something. So.
And Darlene has popped in and said that Don't Push the Button is a book that she has read with children at her library, and those kids loved it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So how can libraries participate? First of all, it could be as simple as providing access to the nominated books. I know some budgets can be tight at different libraries, but these 5 books, you should know, have been nominated specifically for quality and for supporting the Every Child Ready to Read practices. So I think it makes them a pretty solid purchase.
Well, absolutely, and especially this year since 2 of them are Indiana authors, that's another reason for us to collect those in our libraries.
Another way is you could add the Firefly labels to nominees and winners to further promote the award and the books. And again, just to pop out here, show you, we even have those online. So we have circle labels for nominees so that you can print those out, cut them, and put them on the book spine or on the front, however you do at your library.
And if you want to just, the name of the file is actually there at the top, and you might be able to see it. It does say compatible with Avery 8293 labels. So I believe that those are the labels that you can buy and put them in your printer, and then they will come out perfectly.
Perfect. And then you have stickers.
Yeah, and
you
then
can
you have
stick them right on there.
Supposedly. I haven't actually tried it, but it's supposed to work. So.
And again, here's the circle label then when we name the winner. So the same thing, same size up here. So.
This is really an aside, but I am wondering how many of you would want us to provide you with those labels. I'm sure you're all going to say yes. But I'll just ask. You can put that in the chat box if you're interested in getting labels. We did provide those the first year, but we haven't provided them since. So I'm just wondering if people want them. Everyone's saying yes. Okay. I'm going to put a note about that, and maybe next year, or maybe for the 5th year of the award, we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, along with the ballots for mailing anyway.
Okay, thanks.
That's a good idea. No, that's a good idea. Yeah. We'll see if we can swing it. Okay, so labels, so adding the Firefly labels, that further promotes the award. It also promotes those books, those that have been nominated. Library staff can promote the award and encourage kids to vote. Set up an inviting book display of the books and the ballots. Print out more ballots from the website to give out. Let parents know about the award and how the voting works. You can be a voting location. Collect completed ballots from parents and kids. It's real simple. Just tally up the votes for each of the books and send them to Indiana Center for the Book by May 19th. Make sure to let your patrons know they can simply turn in their ballots to you. A lot of time that's just making it easy for them, so more likely that they'll participate. And you can incorporate the Firefly Award into your early literacy program. So first let's start out with a poll and just kind of get a feeler out here for how many people have used the Firefly Award. Oh, shoot.
It's okay.
Okay.
It looks like people are participating. So the question is, have you used the Firefly Award in your early literacy programming? And we don't have too many people on the webinar today, but it looks like most of you are participating, so that's great. Oh, I'm kind of excited to see that a lot of you have not used it. Oh, we're at 50-50. Perfect. Yay. But that's great because that means that, some of you have used it in the past and some of you have not. Okay, we're going to take just a second to get Christy back to where she needs to be. Can you hear? Okay, now they can hear us. We're good.
All right.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, and share. Escape. Because now you're not sharing. Come here. There we go. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Sorry.
Forgot the microphone.
Yeah, there's that. Okay, so now Christy
Now
can
you
say
can.
all the things that she just said.
Okay, so let me back up and say now is the fun part where we would get to talk about programs. So we get to brainstorm some ideas. There's many ways to use the Firefly Award in your early literacy programs. So I'm going to throw out just a few ideas to get us started. But then I'm going to give you all the opportunity to chime in with new ideas or even programs that have worked for you in the past. So first off, passive programs. Let's say you have your programs already planned out. These are some things that you can kind of start planning and put out pretty easily. So you could do a cool display about the award with the current nominees, ballots, put out some crayons, maybe a ballot box, maybe a make and take craft to make fireflies, or even coloring sheets to attract kids to the display. So this one I've included, I found on Pinterest, but it's from Tippy Toe Crafts. And this is a plastic spoon painted with the glow-in-the-dark paint, and then just some black construction paper cut out that they put together. And after being in the light, they should be able to take it into the dark, and they have a real glowing firefly.
That's really fun. I really like the idea of focusing on the firefly as a bug to help highlight this program too. I don't know. I know there are librarians on the webinar. Maybe someone can look this up for us, but I think that the firefly or the lightning bug, either way, we don't discriminate, but I think it has been chosen for the Indiana State bug.
I know it was up in
up for it.
Yeah, I know it was up for it in this session, this legislative session, and I
don't
never
know if they
heard.
got to it or not.
We should look that up.
Yeah, we should try to figure that out. And I also wanted to mention one other quick craft that you can do. I believe that there are glow-in-the-dark Band-Aids for kids.
Mhm.
And if you take those and put them just in a little X on a black sheet of paper and then add some, like, I don't know, doodads, eyes, or whatever, they end up looking like a firefly.
I saw that too.
It's really cute.
Yeah, I saw those. I did a quick search on Pinterest, and there were a ton.
I'm
You can
sure.
even get glitter involved for the the glow part.
There are some of us that are not allowed to use glitter.
Oh.
On our papers. I'm sure that is the case.
Some of you might have cringed out there at the mention of glitter, but outreach is another way that you can get involved and include it in your programming. Just include the nominees and the ballots and bags of materials for daycares or preschools to encourage their participation. Also, you can use the resources on teachingbooks.net. So via Inspire, the list of nominees is included in the Indiana Lists section. So there's various resources and activity ideas for each book. So I'm going to try to pop out and not cause any problems again this time.
You'll be fine.
So back to our library, the Indiana State Library home, of course, you can get to Inspire. And then right on the front page of Inspire is teachingbooks.net. It'll ask me probably what kind of library, or so we're just going to say other, and go in. And you come to their main page. At the bottom, they have these. If you haven't seen these are great, by the way. You have your read alouds. You also have the Young Hoosier Book Awards, the Elliott Rosewater. We're not on the front page, but if you see all Indiana reading lists, you'll see the Firefly pretty clearly. So here's for the 2017 nominees. And they have all of the nominees down here. And then if you click on the book, you see other resources that they have. You can get pronunciations for the names, learn about the authors and illustrators, but also under book guides and lesson plans, there's an activity kit, and some other things. So you might check some of the books and see if there are other things that you can use for your programming.
Right, so you might do a series of programs and do 5 story times and focus on one book each story time. You could do that.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. So you could do a one-off, a special Firefly story time where you read all 5 books in one story time. Now this can be challenging, I'm not going to lie.
But you've done it, right?
I've done it. It can be done. It also kind of depends on your group of kids too. If you don't think that they can handle 5 books, I mean, that's your call, but it can be done. Here at the State Library, we have the day early learning from the Government Center. The pre-K class comes over to the State Library once a month. So we really had to do it in one story time because the chances were not good of them remembering those books to the next one and being able to vote. So we did it in one story time. I talked about the award and how their votes will help decide which book will win the state award. We read each of the books. I began with the longest book while you still have their immediate attention. Yep, yeah. It's at the highest. So I did try to strategically plan the order of the books to kind of keep them going, keep it moving. If you need to, it's also recommended you could allow for stretching or active time in between if you need to, kind of get the wiggles out in between books. You can pass out crayons and assist them with voting at the end. I used little baskets that I set up. So I set out all of the books at the end, and we put little baskets in front of them and gave them the little wooden building blocks that we have in the center, and they each had a block, and they would go place their block in the basket of their favorite book. And once they did that, then they had free playtime in the Young Readers Center. But that kind of got them up and let them physically add their vote to the basket. So that's just how we did it.
Yeah, so I like that example because that shows the people on the webinar today that you don't actually have to, have ballots for every kid. They don't actually have to circle, especially if you're doing a, like a program in your library. I've seen it done the way you just described it. I've also seen it done where they cut out fireflies and each of the kid gets a little firefly and they put those like on top of the book that they're voting for. So you can do it that way too. So the kids don't actually have to circle on a ballot, but you certainly can do that. Of course.
Yeah, you can get
But
creative.
they don't have to, but you can get creative because all we care about is getting the totals at the end. So.
As long as you can tally. I did put tape pictures of the books covers to the baskets. So when I cleared the baskets up, I could remember
exactly
which basket or which votes go for which book.
That would be essential.
Yeah, so you just want to make sure that you can tally them afterwards. That's for sure. So the last but not least, you could do a Firefly Storytime series. So in public libraries, you may have 1 to 2 story times a week, or you have weekly story times, or maybe you have the older kids under age 6, but maybe skewing towards the older side, and you could spread the books out. You think you could spread the books out among a few weeks of story times. So this would be fun. You could include activities with each book to help the kids remember them. So just some examples just to kind of throw out there and get us thinking. Some activities that might be possible for the 2017 nominees. For Best in Snow, a really easy way to relate that there are a ton of snow and winter crafts, making snowflakes and things like that, and songs that are online and on Pinterest. So I think it would be neat to make something tangible that you could keep the sample that you make in the room throughout the series, so that when you go back and you're revisiting the books and reviewing, you also have those crafts that they made, or the craft that you made, to kind of remind them of that program. Also, if your library is, one of their goals is to incorporate STEM activities, this is a really good one to talk about liquid versus solid, or do experiments with melting ice. So that one would be an easy one to incorporate. For Grumpy Pants, you could talk about feelings using emojis on a flannel board could be the activity. And maybe they create their own emojis using different feelings. I think kids even this age are familiar with emojis on their parents' phones. So they know those, and you could talk about expressing different feelings.
I think that's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a cute idea.
For Don't Wake Up the Tiger, if you've read this book, or if you haven't read this book, part of it is the kids interacting with the tiger. The tiger's asleep, and you have to rub the tiger's belly to keep her asleep, or rock her gently with a lullaby. So for this one, I thought it would be neat to have the children make the craft first. So make a tiger, color a tiger. I even saw one that was as simple as ripping black paper and pasting it on orange paper to make tiger stripes, just something that each of them can hold, and then as you read the book, they can use their tigers
I love that
to act out
so
the book,
cute.
right?
Yeah.
So they can rub the bellies of their tiger and rock it and everything as you're reading. So that would make that one a lot more fun. And at the end, you can also incorporate balloons. Who doesn't like balloons? Just having regular balloons out and letting them play with those. Who doesn't love the game of keeping the balloon off the floor? Right? You could even do, again, if you wanted to incorporate some STEM, use helium balloons to test which items tied to them will float or which items will weigh the balloon down. And that goes perfectly with this book when different animals are trying to float over Tiger, the sleeping tiger.
Idea. Yeah.
So it goes really well with that. Music class today, most obviously musical instruments, great tie-in. You could even make musical instruments or play with musical instruments that you have. This one is in a fun, rhyming, sing-song kind of text, and so you could even get the egg shakers out or something like that that they can kind of shake along while you're reading. Something you can make is make ribbon sticks are really easy. I saw they were make like from dowel rods, and you tie some ribbons on, so they just kind of make something to dance with.
I've also seen those with, do you remember the hair ties from the 80s?
Yeah.
Like I don't remember.
The scrunchies?
Yeah, scrunchies. That's the word. If you tie ribbons on scrunchies or something like that, then they can put that on their wrist.
Yeah.
And then it's not like a stick that they're going to poke
That's
the rubber's
true.
eye out.
No weaponry, right?
So yeah, so scrunchies with ribbons is another good.
That would be so much
do.
fun, and they can wave those around.
Yeah. And easy to make on your sewing machine.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a volunteer at your library that wants to do that for you.
And as simple as, you know what, put on some music afterwards and let the kids dance. How much fun would that be? And then last but not least, race car count. You can make race cars, paper, toilet paper rolls, coloring pages, however you'd like to. We actually had an example. I don't know, Linda Peterson, is she on today? I don't think so, but I'm going to use her as an example because she sent in, Linda Peterson at the Bloomfield Eastern Greene County Public Library was kind enough to send us pictures recently of her program with her preschoolers voting for the Literacy the Firefly Award. And I saw in the pictures the kids were circling their choices and putting them in the basket, but I also saw they had done race car craft. They had all colored in different race cars and things like that. So I just wanted to use that as an example. And a fun way to fun activity, maybe afterwards, you can experiment with different inclines and ramps using real Matchbox cars and have them go down the ramps and what goes faster and who wins. And
yeah, you could do a whole Hot Wheels thing.
So many things. Yeah, that's an easy one to come up with stuff for. So once you've kind of read all the books, once you gather them back up, remember this is a series, so you might have done it over a few story times. You gather all 5 books and do a brief review of each, maybe using the crafts or the visual prompts to jog their memories, and then vote. So again, we talked about this a little bit already, how the different ways you can vote. So we talked about using crayons to circle their favorite. I also thought if you printed out, because we suggest, don't use the actual books, but print out pictures of the covers of the books, and they could go up and just put a sticker on, the book that is their choice and the one with the most stickers. So again, especially at the state library, we say don't put stickers on books.
No.
but
maybe you could use a Post-it note too.
Post-it notes works. Those
would
come off nice. Yeah. You could place balls or tickets in the basket next to the book they like best. I mean, you could pretty much do it however you'd like as long as you can tally up the votes at the end. So lots of ways to do the voting. So now is a chance, I've kind of thrown out a few things, but now is the chance to hear from you. What are some other ideas you have? Even if you've never done it before, maybe we've got your creative juices flowing and you've thought of some cool things to do.
And while people are thinking about that, Christy, did we share the one-pager that Beth Monk put together?
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Let's go ahead and
Let's
show
do that
while people are typing in the chat box with all of their thoughts. So this is another resource that's available on the Center for the Book page under the Indiana Early Literacy Firefly Award. And it's a PDF called Using the Award in Your Library, and it's a one-page document that actually Beth Monk, who's on our committee, put together. And so you can see she's suggesting you could do a tournament of books using the Firefly books. She does have some ideas there for story time. You can do a big display with the books, and you can also she also has a sticker chart so that kids can vote on a sticker chart if you want. So she has some other ideas there that I just wanted to be sure to point out to you guys. And we're really interested in knowing how you use this. So even if you don't have time to share in the chat box today, feel free to send us information on how you do it or pictures of your program. We love those things.
Absolutely.
So Robin says she's planning on using the race car book and making race cars out of boxes for the kids to sit in while she reads the book.
Oh, how fun.
That's very cute. I've seen that done in programs where they call it a drive-in.
Oh, that's great.
And like you're showing a movie too. So that might be something else. But
how fun. I
double
love
those
that
up.
idea.
Yeah, that's really fun. Kathleen says they have a bunch of extra books that they were able to give away. So they give each child a book when they voted.
That's
Happiness.
awesome.
We love that. That's fantastic. I love rewarding reading with reading.
Oh,
That's a great
absolutely.
idea. Any other thoughts? Anybody have things they want to share? I do love the idea about also focusing on the books themselves, but also focusing on the Firefly itself. I think that's fun too. And there's so many different ways to vote. So
There
many
are.
different ways.
If anybody has even ideas, not just programming or story time ideas, but even voting ideas, craft ideas, all are welcome. We love to hear and share about all the cool things that you've done or cool things that you have thought of during this time.
Or even other ways that we can support the award. I've written down that it would be good for you guys to have labels for the books, but if there's other things that we can do to support it, clearly we try to do a webinar like this every year to just encourage people to participate. And we don't have a big budget, but we'd still be interested in knowing the kinds of things that you might be interested in us doing to help support the award.
We're all for seeing what we can do.
Right.
Do you want to keep on thinking of
Yeah.
things? And I'm just going to say, like, how else can you participate? And we can always go back to some
Sure.
more other ideas as they pop up. So another way to participate is join the Firefly Award Committee. Just a reminder, this includes early childhood development professionals, librarians, teachers, caregivers, and program coordinators. So you could even spread the word. If you have some great contacts at local daycares or preschools, at your local schools that you work closely with and you think might be interested in being involved, spread the word. Give them our contact information for Indiana Center for the Book. Our committee is currently working on bylaws, so kind of hammering out some of these details of the committee. And so we'll, after this year, have a better idea of how many more spots we'll have available. But I think it's safe to say that it would be ideal for us to include representatives from each of the ILF districts so that we cover different parts of the state. I think it's also ideal to have more participation, to have participation by those professionals that aren't necessarily librarians. So mixing it in, kind of having a mix of librarians and others that work in other fields with the younger kids. And like I said, if you're interested or know someone, just contact us. It's not a huge time commitment, so if you're worried about that.
It's really not. It's a great committee to be a part of. I think we literally have 2 meetings a year, and they're both online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's no traveling. The online phone meetings, they're right. I couldn't remember. There are just 2 a year, but it seems like we get so much done during that time.
Sure, yes, yeah.
And then it's reading fun picture books, around 30-ish.
Mm-hmm.
As we get more nominations, it might be a little more, but still.
And there is some work that people have done, not during those meetings. Obviously, the work of reading the books takes some time. And, Beth Monk put that one pager for us together. We have someone else that's looking at the bylaws right now. So sometimes there are little tasks that happen, but all in all, it's a pretty easy committee.
And it's a fun one, and you get to hear about the bigger pool of books that we look
Right.
at from the nominations, and I think that really helps too. There are lots of books that I hadn't heard of or wasn't aware of, and kind of put them on my radar. So that's always fun, of course, to talk about books.
And I do want to mention we got a comment about something else that we can do to support the award. Sarah
great.
says, the state library has storytime kits. These books would be a great addition to those kits.
That would.
It's true, Sarah. It would be. It would be. Maybe we could do one that's a general Firefly kit, because then it wouldn't turn over every year.
Mhm.
Because the other thing about the state library is that we're not very flexible when it comes to adding new programs. So doing a new one every year with the 5 books might be tough. Did we even get all the 5 books in?
Not this year. There was
Not yet.
one year I think they were donated.
Yeah. So anyway, but we could certainly do a Firefly one.
That's a good idea.
And with different voting ways to interact with it. So yes, we could certainly do that. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Here's a question. You mentioned voting stations. How do you find out who would be a voting station? Or is that all libraries? It's really just participating libraries. So we don't have a list at all, and maybe that's something else that we could think about doing. If you are participating, to maybe register with us. That's something we haven't done in the past. But really, it's just if you're collecting votes, then you're a voting station.
Right.
But I don't know how to find out who else is a voting station.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
So in this, it was kind of like how can libraries participate, and that's by being a voting station, and that is there is no formal registration or anything. It's just providing the ballots and agreeing to gather those ballots, count the tallies, and send them to the Indiana Center for the Book. That makes you a voting station. So to find your local one,
It might be you.
It might be you. Or even go to the public library, or send them individually. If you have homeschool families that had young kids,
Mhm.
and they decided to do it at home, we just want to make sure it's the age range we're talking about, and make sure they have access to those books. But they could send them directly to us as well.
Yeah. That's a really good point, though, Elizabeth. That's something that we may talk about in the next committee meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up.
And then Darlin says they have a display with 2 copies of each book on the display along with the ballots, and they encourage the parents to read them to their children, and they keep that display in that area up all month.
That's awesome.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for all those great comments.
Yeah, those are great. We also had some questions mixed in, but does anybody else have any other questions for me or Suzanne about the Firefly Award, about Indiana Center for the Book, or even about the Young Reader Center here at the State Library, since I'm here?
That's right. Christy's here. Any questions at all?
All right. Well, we'll stay up a few more.
Do you have your contact
I
information?
do.
There we go. Perfect.
A big thank you for tuning in today for the webinar about the Firefly. So here is my name, if you need for spelling, and my email here at the library and phone number. Indiana Center for the Book, again, that email. Both Suzanne and I are on there, so if you have any questions, you're going to get a response. You can send your tallies, your vote tallies there, anything regarding Indiana Center for the Book. And then the Indiana Early Literacy Firefly Award, that's the direct link, but again, you can find it through the library's website. And just to kind of reiterate, the teachingbooks.net is a resource through Inspire for the Firefly Award, but again, you saw any of the Indiana award lists and all sorts of other books on there. It's really a great resource, and we're very happy that they help put together the ballots and print them out for us.
Okay, thank you so much, Christy. So everybody, what's going to happen next is I'm going to have Lisa stop the recording. Thank you, Lisa, but everyone needs to hang on.